Man, just saying the word Castlevania takes me right back to my childhood, sitting cross-legged on the carpet in front of my old CRT TV, the NES humming like it was alive. I was probably 8 or 9, clutching that rectangular controller like it was a lifeline, ready to take on Dracula himself. Castlevania on the NES wasn't just a game to me back then. It was an adventure, a spooky, thrilling world that felt like it was built just for me. I remember popping in that gray cartridge, hearing that iconic title screen music, and feeling this mix of excitement and dread. Even now, decades later, I can still hear those chiptune melodies in my head, like a Gothic orchestra stuck on repeat. Let's talk about why this game, released back in 1986 in Japan and 1987 in North America, still holds up as one of the NES's greatest treasures. First off, Castlevania's vibe was unlike anything I'd played as a kid. You're Simon Belmont, this badass vampire hunter armed with a whip called the Vampire Killer, stomping through a creepy castle to take down Dracula. The story's simple. Dracula's evil, you're the hero, go get him. But it didn't need to be complex to hook me. The game's atmosphere did all the heavy lifting. Those pixelated backgrounds with their crumbling stone walls, flickering candles, and eerie moonlight made every stage feel like I was stepping into a horror movie. I remember my little kid brain imagining what it'd be like to actually walk through those halls, hearing the clank of armor from those walking skeletons or the screech of those pesky bats. The game didn't just look spooky, it felt spooky, like you were always one wrong step from doom. The controls, though, let's be real, they were stiff as a board. Simon moves like he's got cement in his boots. You press jump, and he commits to this slow, arcing leap that you can't adjust mid-air. If you've played it, you know the pain of mistiming a jump and falling into a pit or getting knocked back by a skeleton's bone toss. I used to scream at the TV when I'd miss a platform by a pixel and plummet to my death. But here's the thing, those clunky controls forced me to get good. You had to learn the game's rhythm, memorize enemy patterns, and time every move like you were conducting a symphony. It was frustrating, sure, but when you nailed a tough section, like dodging those Medusa heads in Stage 3 while whipping candles for hearts, it felt like you just conquered the world. Speaking of whipping, the Vampire Killer Whip is iconic for a reason. It's not just a weapon, it's your best friend. You start with this short leather whip, but grabbing those chain upgrades made you feel unstoppable. I still remember the first time I got the long chain whip and started smacking enemies from halfway across the screen. It was like Simon leveled up into a superhero. The sub-weapons, though, they were the real game changers. You'd break a candle, grab a dagger, holy water, or cross, and suddenly you had this whole arsenal to play with. My favorite was always the holy water. It'd stun enemies and let me whip them into oblivion. But you had to manage those hearts, which acted like ammo, so every sub-weapon toss felt like a big decision. Should I spam daggers at that boss, or save my hearts for later? Kid me agonized over those choices. The stages themselves were a masterclass in level design, even if they drove me up the wall sometimes. Each of the 6 blocks, broken into 18 stages total, had its own personality. The first block, with its castle courtyard and zombie hordes, eased you in, but by the time you hit Block 4 with those rotating platforms and flying Medusa heads, the game was like, okay kid, let's see what you're made of. I spent hours, trying to get through that clock tower in Block 5. Those gears, the knights, and those freaking hunchbacks jumping around like fleas, it was pure chaos. But when I finally made it to Dracula's chamber, heart pounding, I felt like I'd earned it. Every stage forced you to adapt, to learn, to respect the castle's rules. The enemies were another highlight. Skeletons, bats, ghosts, and those annoying floating Medusa heads. They all had distinct patterns you had to figure out. I used to hate those Medusa heads with a passion, swooping in with their wavy flight paths, knocking me off ledges. But the bosses? Oh man, they were something else. Each one felt like a showdown. The giant bat in Block 1 was simple enough, but by the time you hit Frankenstein's monster or Death himself, you were sweating bullets. Dracula's final fight was the ultimate test. That first form, teleporting and spitting fireballs, was bad enough, But then he transforms into this giant demon thing. I remember my jaw dropping the first time I saw it. Beating him felt like slaying a dragon. Pure triumph. The music, though. Can we talk about the music? Castlevania's soundtrack is legendary, and for good reason. Tracks like Vampire Killer and Wicked Child are burned into my brain. They're catchy, intense, and perfectly match the game's Gothic vibe. I'd hum those tunes while riding my bike to school, pretending I was Simon Belmont on a mission. Even now, I'll catch myself whistling Heart of Fire while doing dishes. The sound effects too, like the crack of the whip or the chime of picking up a heart, were so satisfying. It's like the game knew how to reward you just for playing it. Now, I won't pretend Castlevania was perfect. The difficulty could be brutal, especially for a kid. Those knockback mechanics, where getting hit sends you flying back, led to so many cheap deaths. Fall into a pit because a bat grazed you? Game over. And don't get me started on the limited continues. You'd get sent back to the start of a block, and if you ran out of lives, it was back to the title screen. I lost count of how many times I rage quit, only to come back the next day, determined to crack it. The game didn't hold your hand, and that was both its strength and its flaw. It demanded patience, precision, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes, qualities kid me didn't always have. Looking back, Castlevania wasn't just a game. It was a lesson in perseverance. It taught me to keep going, even when things got tough. It was one of the first games that made me feel like I was part of something bigger, like I was living out a horror epic. Sure, the graphics are blocky by today's standards, and the controls haven't aged as gracefully as, say, Mario's. But there's a reason people still speedrun this game, why it's inspired countless sequels and even a Netflix show. Castlevania on the NES nailed the balance of challenge, atmosphere, and charm. It's a game that respects your intelligence and rewards your effort. Playing it now through emulators or those classic NES re-releases, it still holds up. Maybe it's nostalgia talking, but there's something timeless about guiding Simon through that haunted castle, whip in hand, ready to take on the forces of darkness. If you've never played it, do yourself a favor and give it a shot. It's not just a piece of gaming history. It's a reminder of why we fell in love with video games in the first place. For me, it's more than a cartridge. It's a time machine, taking me back to those long afternoons when I was just a kid, battling Dracula and feeling like a hero.